Hi, Brian.
Okay, Mr. Chair, we are recording. It's 5 o'clock and it looks like we have quorum, so we can begin.
Okay, thank you very much. And is my audio sufficient, everybody?
Yep.
Okay, thank
Very
you.
good, Dave.
Excellent. Okay, we'll do a call to order here on their Thursday, July 6th, meeting of the Airport Commission. Brian Hamilton,
Here.
Jeffrey Jackson Alder. Not. Kevin Munson.
Hang on. Here. Trying to get my mute to work. Here.
Very good. David Schwartz.
I am here.
Thank you. Brian Shaw. Not present. Jack Young.
Here.
And one note to all the commissioners on board: in order to be considered present at the meeting, your camera must remain on. Oh, Brian Shaw.
Hello.
All right. Can you say here?
I can.
Okay.
Here, yes, here.
Thank you very much.
Just in time.
And I hear you.
Good.
Okay, fantastic. And I just reminded everybody, Brian, that your cameras must remain on to be considered present at the meeting. I will ask if we have a proof of posting of our meeting at the City Hall and at the airport.
Yes, we do. And also posted on the city's Airport Commission listserv.
Okay, thank you very much. Approval of the minutes really is an acceptance on my part. And I do accept the minutes with one slight minor modification to the page 2 of the minutes, where under the airport manager report, it was noted that 2 charter airplanes are approved for UL 94, and I do believe that's rental airplanes.
Right.
Okay, and other commissioners, if you have any comments, that would just be a minor correction or notes, please state that now. Otherwise, I approve the minutes as accepted. Okay, very good. Thank you. Moving on, we're going to start the meeting immediately with a presentation by the Bureau of Aeronautics. And what I would like to start out with is just have members of the BOA introduce themselves, and then we can delve into the outline from there. And Brian, if you have any comments as we get into this, please chime in.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having us on. My name is Lucas Ward. I'm the Construction Standards Officer for the Bureau currently. I was previously a project manager, so I'm temporarily filling in as a project manager for the Middleton Airport. That would be the role that was previously held by Josh Holbrook, if you guys are familiar with him. So I handle, your point of contact for the airport, all your projects, and then on top of that, I'm also in charge of bidding and planning and our construction standards for the Bureau. I think we also have Mark.
Yeah, thanks, Lucas. I'm Mark Rutschkowski. I'm also with the Bureau of Aeronautics. I am the program engineer for the state, so that means I deal with everything funding, both airport improvement program, the entitlements that the airport receives, and then now also the bill, the bipartisan infrastructure law, which is additional funding available to your airport. So happy to talk funding, happy to talk capital improvement plan, anything like that. And thanks for having us tonight.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. And is there anybody else here from BOA? I see a hand raised, or no, just 2 representatives. Okay.
As far as I know.
Great. Not in any particular order, we can start out with some guidance on our AWAS. Rich, why don't you start with how you got into this, and we'll take it from there.
Well, at the land use seminar where I met these 2 gentlemen and decided it would be a great idea to have them come in and talk to us, there was a section on AWAS aging, and we have a unit that is aging. So that's something that we should be considering, and I think it's 14 years old now, working on 15, which is, I believe, they considered the useful life of such a unit. So as it ages, it becomes less reliable and more expensive to replace parts on, if you can even find the parts. Just for everyone, it isn't just a convenient item for our pilots, but any charter aircraft would be coming in to that airport needs to have local weather. Otherwise, they cannot initiate an instrument approach procedure in. So for us to stay viable, we need to have that AWAS up and running for charter aircraft, at least.
Great, thank you. I guess then at this point, looking to the BOA for some guidance on where to start and what we should start doing.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll jump in. There'll be a couple of questions on that since you're reaching the end of that useful life. That is owned by the airport, correct? I know you have some things that are owned by the FBO. The AWAS is airport owned.
It is.
Okay. So then I think you'd probably end up being a good candidate for our AWAS replacement program. And Mark can correct me if I'm wrong. That the Bureau is running. We're trying to get a lot of our AWASs updated across the state, and then we put you into our essentially what will be a 15-year maintenance plan for it, where we kind of cover the costs of parts and labor to a certain point. But the first step of that would obviously be the replacement. Are you guys having any issues with your AWAS right now, just so I can document that? It kind of helps build a better case.
I'm sorry?
Yeah, you're breaking up, Lucas.
I'm sorry.
Lucas said, are we having any current technical issues with our AWAS, Rich?
At the moment, nothing. We haven't had any major breakdowns in a while, not since the flood. We have, and we did have some maintenance done. We could go back and look at all of the records on it. Most recently, we didn't have a sealing that turned out to be bird droppings on the sensor, which our line guy went out and cleaned up. But we weren't getting any wind direction on it, and then we were all stuck at a wind direction because the pivot was frozen. There were a couple, unless the wind was very strong. There've been a couple incidents with it. I'd rather be proactive and replace it when its useful life is out than wait until it breaks down. Speaking along those lines, other infrastructure, we've had our localizer go down twice in 2 weeks now. So that's of about the same age as our AWAS.
Okay.
You
Yeah.
just
So
local lines, Rich?
Localizer.
Localizer.
Yeah, the instrument approach procedure. The DME portion of it worked just fine. The actual guidance has been down, was fixed. Now it's down. I think it's fixed again now. So.
Okay. That one may have a little more problem helping out with, but as far as the AWAS goes, I don't see any reason we can't get you into that statewide program. You'll just be at the mercy of how that program moves along. You're lucky you're at 14 years, so next 2 to 3 years, I would expect that to be replaced. Is that tracking with what you're seeing, Mark?
Yeah, that was actually one of the questions I had. It looks like in our system, I see that it was purchased both in 2007 and 2010. So my guess is it was actually installed in like 2009 to split the difference. So that would make sense to what you're saying, Rich. So yeah, you're right. It's coming up in that 15 years, and we have a group of airports that we're looking at doing previously identified. So they're first in the queue, but we're actually at that point looking at like which airports are we going to replace their AWAS at next. So we could certainly add Middleton to the list for that, because you're asking at the right time. Because as Lucas said, it probably won't be summer of 24, but it'd probably be summer of 25. And I think that kind of jives with useful life timing. Unless you see some really immediate need, I think that is our goal, because our state program that we have for maintenance runs 15 years. So we cover basically anything in that 15-year period, then that ends and it kind of coincides with useful life. So you're actually doing the right thing. You're being proactive. So yeah, we want to get you in this, a new one in the system and kind of replace that. And then, we would take the parts out of it, but then you'd have a brand new one. Everything would be, good to go for quite a few years. So I will definitely in your CIP note that. And then as we start talking with the consultant that's selected, oddly enough, it's actually your former PM, Josh Holbrook, is actually running the AWAS program through SEH as a statewide program. So you get to see him again probably in a year or so on that one.
Very good. Is there any other action that we need to do at airport? Do we have to add this to our projects list, put this on our plans, or are we pretty much enrolled in it as it is?
Just checking the latest petition we had, see if it was on there.
I don't believe it was. I think this one caught us by surprise.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's not on the petition list, no.
Okay. So yeah, we probably need another petition unless there's an old one out there that is still good, but I doubt that's the case as well. So that'd be probably step one on your end. But instead of just going straight AWAS, if there's anything else that you guys need to put on there, we should do that as well. So you don't have to keep going through these petition processes. So I guess the next step on your end would be to provide a list to us on things you'd like to petition for, and then we can get the paperwork out to you guys to run through that again. Is there any questions on that process?
So then in addition to an AWAS petition, are we thinking a localizer as well, Rich?
I don't know what the useful life is on the localizer. I don't know what's available, but it certainly is useful to have that there. And if we're noting it out of service every other week or every week, in this case, it's not something that's reliable. So I would certainly want to look into that and see the possibilities of funding for an upgrade and or whatever we need to do on it to keep it, get it up to speed.
This is Mark. Might it be helpful to quickly mention what these things are for any commission members who doesn't know?
Okay, the AWAS is the Automated Weather Observation Service. I believe that's what I always called it.
Right.
It updates, or minute weather as we often refer to it as, and that's on broadcast. It's also tied into a computerized system. So when you go online and get a weather brief, you'll have I think they sample that once every hour. So it's very important for us. And as I said before, for commercial operations, you have to have weather at that airport before you can start an instrument approach, if it is under instrument conditions. So it's important for us to have that operating. The localizer transmitter sends out it's ground-based nav. It sends out a signal. In this case, it's aligned with runway 10. So it's sending the signal to the west. So when we come in, we line up on it and can land to the east. It is located at the far west end of the property. And
East end, right?
East end, excuse me. Yes, you're correct. And it is, if you don't have a GPS that's on board the aircraft, and many, many aircraft do not, it's the most precise approach that we have, short of, we don't have an ILS, we can't have an ILS, instrument landing system. That would be something with vertical guidance on the ground based. We don't have the clearances for that. So this is as good as it gets for ground based for us. And that is, again, very important to have both for training and for utility. So anyone there that, I don't know, it seems like almost everyone here is a pilot, but is that clear to everyone?
Yep.
Okay, very good.
Rich, or others, I guess BOA, maybe you guys might have a perspective on this too. What's the current trend right now? I know RNAV isn't the precision approach, but airports our size, continuing to invest in ILS or localizer technologies. What's the trend right now?
Yeah, it's a fair question, a fair point. I would say that the trend is probably going away from an ILS system. We don't see a lot of those going in anymore because of the GPS. When you have something out there like that, though, it is hard to lose something. And if you're stuck not getting those, instrument approaches for other reasons, it's a handy tool to have for certain. as far as that project would go in terms of eligibility, and this kind of ties into your question, is it'd probably only be state aid. Is all we could assist with, because I don't think the feds are interested in continuing to support those. Maybe Mark knows a little bit more than I do. Actually, I know he knows more than I do.
Yeah, Lucas has that right, that generally speaking, if you want federal assistance, you'd have to pass a BCA, a benefit cost analysis, and that's very difficult to do. So I think the right thing to do is petition for it, because if we don't petition, then we know we can't fund it. And I think it'd be something, if the airport really wants to keep it, then it's a discussion with our director about, utilizing state aid if the city feels that that is something that they want to, contribute to as well. It'd probably be in 80-20. Split 80% state, 20% sponsor, but that'd be, we make those on a case by case decision, but petitioning for it be the first step in that.
Is there
You had your hand up.
sorry, is there just follow up on that? Is there a stated strategy or timeline or objective for either moving toward GPS or moving further away from ILS or deeper into ILS and only ILS and foregoing localizer technology? What or localizer only? What's the current federal plan on that?
I think, as Lucas kind of alluded to, the feds are kind of moving away from ground-based nav aids for good or for bad. Unless you're at, one of the primary airports there, it seems they still find it to support, ILS systems, but rarely see that at a non-primary GA airport anymore. Like I said, that's not, it's not for me to weigh on. That's a federal thing. That's why we take a look at it based upon, what is the airport really wants to keep it. If the community really want, if the sponsor really wants that there, that's why we, put some thought into it for state aid. I don't know that we actually have like a overall strategy on that. It's more like a case by case. If somebody's like, hey, we got some approach lights, we don't want to lose them. We see the value of that if the community and the airport sees the value of that.
Is there an age limit on the AWAS unit?
As in, if you didn't replace it in 15 years, what would happen? Is that kind of your?
Yeah, it doesn't come out of the system if it's 15 or more, or 14 or 18. I just wondering if there's time.
Not necessarily. Generally speaking, the our program goes for 15 years, and then after that, it's kind of at risk if you had some major issue with it. But right now, because we have so many that are kind of, how do I want to say, over 15 years, I think we're kind of taking it with a more realistic look. But in the long term, after you replace it this time, 15 years from now, the expectation would be you're going to replace it at 15 years, so that or take the risk knowingly that if you have maintenance on it, we're not going to cover it. Whereas within that 15 years, we're committed to as part of our statewide program.
Rich, I don't know if FYI, I don't know if it's a snafu between the AWAS and ForeFlight, but ForeFlight wasn't reporting ceilings frequently earlier or last week, quite a bit off of Maury. But I wasn't on site, so I don't know if the recording was actually given the was actually giving the ceilings, or if it was just a snafu between the hookup.
No, what was happening, Jack, and I explained that earlier. You might have missed it. There were bird droppings on the sensor. So Greg went out and cleaned it off, and then it was fine. But that is one of the things, bird droppings, bug nests, our tech said, take a can of wasp spray out there because it's wasp season, they're building nests. So anything like that can throw those sensors off. They're pretty obviously sensitive. So we just have to, we'll call it in. He calls us, gives us a suggestion. We go check it out. And if we can fix it, we fix it. If not, the tech that has the state contract will show up and go over it. So yeah, we were aware of that, and that was exactly what was going on, was bird droppings. So.
Thank you, Greg.
Kevin, you had your hand up. You have your hand up. And you're muted.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I've had my hand up for a while here. So yeah, just remind people to put their hands up so we don't get off on just anomalous conversations. So anyway, Rich, as far as the localizer, I mean, there's one thing that AWAS isn't reporting some of its telemetry and its parameters, but if there's issues with the localizer, we need, I mean, it's an active and approved approach right now. We need to get that fixed. You can't be inbound on the localizer and then all of a sudden it goes down, because it's just going to give you, I mean, you may get a flag on your VOR, but it's going to give you that, a reading that you're exactly on course, right? That's not good. You could be off course, then you hit something. So, I mean, in the meantime, while we're trying to figure out if we want to keep it long-term, we need to get it to us, to where it's reliable. I mean, there's no way to, hey, it just went out, get it on a chart NOTAM, and then now, report it to the FAA. So the folks coming in can check to see if it's functional or not. It doesn't work that way. I've been on localizers, done many localizers and ILSs, and they've gone out and sometimes you get notifications, sometimes you're checking your altitudes, you just have a hunch that something's not right. You do the miss. So, I mean, I'd recommend that we make sure that it's reliable. I'd hate for, someone to be in IMC and then it goes out and they're, a mile out and thinking they're right on course. So, I mean, it sounds like it's not that reliable. I don't know if we should take it down or not.
Yeah, I monitor it on a daily basis, Kevin, when I'm there. Every time I go up, I have it tuned in. And so we're checking it regularly. We also have a monitor in the office, but that's less reliable than actually being out. Now, as an instrument instructor, as you were, you should notice if it goes away. There'll be a flag. Any instrument pilot knows that if the needle's staying dead center the whole approach, something's wrong, probably. So, but mild joke. Anyway, for those of you who aren't pilots, there is an indicator if you lose a signal, and the flag comes up, but it's not, it doesn't have a big X across the system. So Kevin is correct. Absolutely, we are monitoring it. We're calling it in as soon as there's an issue. NOTAM is notice to airmen is set up. The unit is pulled offline until they can fix it, and people they just won't get a signal when they dial it up. It's simple as that. But yes, it's getting to the point where 2 outages in 2 weeks. We gotta look at it and see if this is getting to its useful life. And I know it's expensive. It's very useful for us, especially in the training realm. But again, that's something that's above my pay grade, whether the city decides to abandon it or keep it. But I would say it's worth keeping. And and I agree with you, Kevin. We got to get it to where it's very reliable.
So then perhaps some guidance on pursuing a future localizer discussion, maybe sooner than later, kind of aiming this at Brian a little bit. Get it on a future meeting, get an idea of cost, and then maybe check in with financing, based on an 80-20 split, see where we would sit financially with a localizer and AWAS. Does that sound about on track, Brian?
Yeah, we'll do our best to get some more information and work with the BOA staff to figure out the best pathway for either a new petition or amendment of our existing petition to add this on there.
Okay, and then it sounds like, Rich, I mean, from a technology standpoint, either we have a localizer or we don't. And if we don't, then it, in summary, would limit the airport's operation, obviously in IMC conditions, quite a bit.
Yes.
Okay. So, if we need to have more discussion on that and it's going to get more specific, or we should just forge ahead and just get some numbers put together and an idea of what we're up against, do you think?
I would say so.
Okay, thank you. Do we have any more discussion we'd like to pursue on these two pieces of technology, or any other technology that we'd like to run past BOA before we maybe take a look at the next items on our list with BOA? Anything else you can think of, Rich? Anything else?
No, I don't think so. At one point, we were looking for a ground communications outlet, or excuse me, a remote communication outlet. We had a GCO that's been abandoned now. But with the advent of cell phones, Bluetooth headsets, really it isn't necessary anymore. And I doubt if we'd be able to get any funding for it in any case. Technologically, I think we're doing all right all the way around. We just updated the lighting. Actually, other than the nav aids and the AWAS, there isn't a heck of a lot more out there. So.
And any comment from BOA on ground communications? Is this something we just don't need to pursue then?
Yeah, generally that's not eligible for federal aid and state aid. It's one of those that could be, but it's a case by case thing, and we have a lot of other priorities type thing. So I think it might be on your petition. So if you wanted to pursue it, we could, start discussing if it could fit and how to fund it. But so I think it was on one of the last ones, I believe, that the airport submitted.
It was. I don't know if it's on the current one.
I'm not seeing on the one I have right now. So if it's something we want to do, might as well put it in the new petition as well, just to refresh it. I'm keeping a running list of items, and I'll share that once we're done if you guys want to see that as well.
Sure. I mean, if it doesn't hurt to put things on there, fine, but certainly don't want to just load it up with anything that would really slow us down from getting what we absolutely need.
Agreed. Yeah, there's a balance there, and certainly you don't want to put things out there that you're not going to necessarily do that might cause contention, because then you're just fighting a battle that might never happen too. That we see that quite a bit on petitions. So it's just the things you actually think you're going to need and do in the next 6 years.
Okay. Any more thoughts then on that side of it? Is Rich, is this something you think we should absolutely keep on there, put on there, or not?
Oh, the remote communications outlet?
Yeah.
No, we should toss that.
Okay.
That's very expensive, and it's really becoming outvoted. There's no point in having it.
Okay, then let's pursue it in that direction then. Let's keep our ask list to the two items. Would there be a priority at this point then? Would the localizer be more, would one need to get addressed sooner than the other without creating a problem? Localizer first, AWAS second?
If you're asking me, David, I would say they can both move forward. They're really separate pools of money. One is a state program, at least I believe so. Mark can tell me more than that, or better, he knows that stuff. But we want to be on the state program because we want to replace that. That seems like a no-brainer. It's already set. The second item is, I think it would be useful, or someone should reach out to the people maintaining our localizer and find out what's going on and what they recommend, and then get a budget on it before we, there's no reason we can't put it on the petition. But again, until we know how much it's going to cost, we have to look at that cost benefit analysis. Is this worth it?
Okay.
Or are we all going to lost GPS approaches, which are far more accurate and far less expensive to maintain?
Okay. I guess, Brian, you'll get that sorted out and we'll move ahead with it.
Yep.
Thank you. Okay, moving on to the next item. We did submit a request for our surface maintenance, taxiways, runways, big long-term project. And I guess really just looking for an update where the BOA is at, and anything we need, anything you need from us, or anything we should hope for or not hope for.
Sure. Just to make sure I have the full scope of this, is just like a crack seal coat type issue.
So the taxiways were, Rich, the taxiways were just repair? Or, no, we're not replacing the taxiways.
Yep.
And the runway was is a resurface.
Yeah, well, we've done the taxiways and we've done the runway on a reseal.
Okay.
In the next 4 to 5 years, we're going to have to be either a rebuild or a reconstruction on both. And if I remember correctly, the taxiways were actually in poorer shape than the runways, so they thought that they would be eligible for a project sooner. I know we have monies available. John Halleck was working with, I believe, our former guy about trying to balance out the money so that the project would come up when we had the money to do it. And as long as it was real close to when it needs to be done. So my concern is, having waited longer than I felt we really should have for the seal and the crack seal, and then the sealing or whatever they put, I can't remember the material they put over the top, that we need to be on top of that. We have to maintain our infrastructure, and we also want to maximize, don't want to leave money on the table. We want to be able to get this in line and ready to go when the money is available and when it's time to build. So my question is, looking at a rebuild of these runway and taxiways, timeline, are we in line? What do we need to do to get in line? And then how are we going to proceed with it?
Okay, so I'm just pulling up your petition from the left to make sure we have it on there.
Should be the first item.
Oh yeah, I missed the taxiway part. I was hoping for the line. Perfect. It's in there. Thanks, Mike. Yeah, so the next step is for me to wrap that up, which I should be able to do next week. I just had a couple questions I sent out to Brian. And once I get those answered, I can get the eligibility statement, which is the conclusion of the petition from last time, which lets us do work out there. And then as soon as that's signed, actually probably before, I can get a consultant selection going to get those projects underway and under design. I'm looking at your PCI, which is your pavement condition index for the taxiways and runways, and your projections into 2023 and 2024 get you into the rehabilitation reconstruction zone for those. So the eligibility looks promising there. So the timeline of that would be selected this year.
Lucas, sorry, your audio is cutting out again.
So I'm going to cut my video in hopes that it fixes that. Sorry about that. So the next steps would be that consultant selection, and we get a design contract going, scope everything out, and make sure we have our environmental wrapped in and comprehensively. I'm not missing anything there. And then during that scoping, we'd also be targeting what type of funding we'd be going after. So these would be larger projects. So you'd probably be looking at a discretionary ask from FAA. And that's that big pot of money that we have to get specific grants for. We have to make an individual ask just for your airport, which we can do easily. It just has very specific timelines and goalposts that we have to meet. So that puts us on like probably a 2 to 3 year.
Oh, we've lost you, Lucas.
Still lost me. I'm so sorry, guys. Can you hear me at all? Hello?
No. Nope, your audio is.
Anything now? Still bad?
Well, it's okay at the moment.
Okay, I'm really sorry about this. So the project timeline would typically be about 2 to 3 years right now, to get on that discretionary list, and get all the pieces put in place that we need to get that discretionary money. So you'd probably be looking at construction in 2026-ish, depending on the type of project. So if it's a full reconstruction, that can go a little bit longer and we have more boxes to check. If it's just a rehabilitation where we're doing milling off what you have there and putting down just a new surface course, that's a little bit easier and a shorter timeline. And that all being said, that also has to fit into our discretionary asks in FAA's program, which is where Mark comes in. I don't know what the DCL looks like out in the future, but what are your thoughts on these projects going for a DCL ask? And sorry, DCL is the discretionary candidate list.
Yeah, I guess to take a step back, the one question I would have for the airport and the city is, what year are you hoping, if everything went right, when would you actually, outside of tomorrow, when would you, want that rehabilitation or reconstruction of your runway and or taxiway to happen? Are we, Lucas's timeline is probably pretty realistic. Before 2026 is probably, not going to happen. But if we're talking 26, 27, 28, that certainly is. But I also want to see if we can meet your expectations too. If you're thinking this is 5 years out, or if it's immediate kind of thing. Because that has a follow-up question too. But I guess I wanted to start there.
As I recall, we're talking a 5-year out. Oh, I'm sorry, Rich, go ahead.
Oh, no, I agree. It's in the 5-year range. That will, let's see, the runway was commissioned at 2004. So 5 years from now would be, I don't know, 25 years old or thereabouts. So that seems to be appropriate for the timeline to rehab it, as opposed to, at least that's what, again, they were thinking, more of a rehab versus a reconstruction. What I'm most concerned about is simply making sure that we get in that line, as opposed to getting pushed back and back and back, and then we'll have deteriorating runways where we might have to go with the full reconstruction. So my thought is start getting going now with that goal of 4, 5, 6 years down the road, making this happen.
Yeah, I think on the funding side of things, that's a realistic plan. Because the way discretionary works, there might be a year where it's so full that we have to ask you to wait a year. But the sooner you get in the queue, then it's easier to take that, right? Because, we're looking at like a series of years. It's set on, 2026, it has to be 26. So if we go to 27, then it still meets your expectations kind of thing. So I would agree with that. Because the one question I'd have as a follow-up then is we do a yearly crack seal program. So we actually had a meeting this morning about next year, looking ahead, and your airport was on the list, I think, from our sponsor meeting several months back with a question mark. So we could do, because maintenance has like a 3-year useful life. That's what FAA refers to it as. So if you do maintenance in 24, we really can't do anything else to the runway or taxiway until 27. But is that a good decision? Should we include Middleton in that? It's a relatively low cost thing to, fill the cracks one more time at, 95.5 money instead of, local, 100% paying for something coming up. So that's a question I have for you, but I certainly would agree with you, Rich, that we could get that project, whether we started immediately or, maybe over the winter, we get that going, shooting for, 20, probably 26, 27 in that time frame, I think would be, something that is very doable. And you already checked the petition, and we have some funds, which I can talk about in a second, but I know you have probably a question for me in return or on that.
Go ahead, Rich.
Oh, okay. Certainly have someone come out and check over everything on an annual basis. The crack seal has been done relatively recently. I guess, gosh, time goes by, it's probably 3 years out already. If it's required, certainly we can go ahead and run with that, because we don't want it to not be sealed and have water get in there and cause issues as we've had in the, well, anyway. So yeah, I'm all about that. That would be great. But I do think we need to know what we need to, how do we get in the process and how do we get in that line, in the queue, to have that targeted where we get the maintenance done in a timely manner when it's appropriate and when the money's available.
Yeah. Okay, Rich, I know exactly what you're looking at. So yeah, maintenance would probably be next year because we waited too much longer. That's going to then push out the other project because of the useful life. So either we do maintenance in 24 or we probably don't do it at all, because then we'd be looking at 27 for a project, which could mean we get the grant in 26, but we often get the grant so late in the calendar year that starting a project in September, we don't want to be pulling the asphalt off of your runway or your taxiway in September and then having, some sort of catastrophe or something like that. And then all of a sudden you don't have a runway for the entire year. That, it's just not going to work. So we want to start that the next spring. So it'd be 27. So I think we could achieve that if everyone thought that was the right plan to do that. And then, so as far as like the actual design goes, then if we were to get that rolling in 2024, we would put your runway and taxiway, rehab in really good spot for, say, the guidelines we're looking at. If we were looking at 26 discretionary for that grant, we'd be actually ahead of my normal calendar. Usually I say by, fall of 2 years before you get the grant, that's when we want to get the project started. You guys would actually be a little bit ahead of that, which is good because we don't need to rush the project. We just need to get it moving. So we have periodic check-ins with FAA for these bigger discretionary projects where they ask, where's this at? Where's your environmental document? Which could be very simple. Is there any planning work to do? Where's the design at? What's the cost estimate? And we can work through those things in an orderly fashion instead of what we've been doing sometimes is like rushing projects. Like that's not helpful. You're not getting as good a product and the consultants are being rushed, through that, whether it's Mead & Hunt or somebody else. So I think that would be a good strategy. If you guys are on board with that, that gives us a timeline and then gives you an idea that if we're starting that, let's say over the winter, 2026 grant is, I think, a very realistic time frame for at least the runway. I think we would probably shoot to do all of it at once, because then you're only shut down the runway and the taxiway, so you're only shut down one time. So one summer, or most of the summer, you're going to be impacted severely, but then you're going to go for a long time after that. And we're not shutting you down again. So that would be our goal to do that. And if we slip 1 year, I think we could probably, it sounds like everybody could live with that. We've done the maintenance, which will help you get that by. So yeah, I think if you're on board with that and you petitioned and we have funds, I think, that kind of gives Lucas, us a roadmap for their project.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll just add that since I'm a temporary PM, I'd love to get the project kind of kicked off and rolling before we have a new hire come in and take over. And then it just sits there. So I'm right on board with you and getting it going so it's not stuck.
Okay, so then in summary, we would start with just doing the annual crack sealing now to buy time for the next 3 years out, stay on track with the petition. Grant funding comes through in 2026 and the build would start in 2027 summer or something like that. Okay.
I think that's a very good summary.
And all right, so I guess Brian, that's in your park.
Okay.
Excuse me, David,
Yes.
would it be appropriate for the group to do a quick, the state likes to know what we really want. I don't see anything at all that I don't want what was just presented.
Okay.
So what does the rest of the airport commission think about this? Can we just do a straw poll and let them know, are we behind it on this timeline? Or do we have to think about it some more? Because as your airport manager, I would recommend strongly that we go ahead with this and move forward and give them an answer now that, yeah, this is something we want to do. I don't see that it's already petitioned for. I would say let's put a commitment toward it at the moment as opposed to leave any ambiguity about this.
Okay.
Just to be, Mr. Chair, just to be clear, the commission members can provide sentiment, expression of intent or desire as part of this conversation, but we can't take formal action per se
Right.
if one is needed. So if we need that, I can put that on the agenda for the next meeting. But I think from the comments we've made thus far, I think BOA has enough to go on to at least start the process to move forward.
Yeah, and I was going to say, the Common Council already did vote on and approve all of the improvements to be done to the airport. So, we have the formal consent of actually the city to do this whole project. So, Kevin, please go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing, that we've already looked into this. We know we need to do it. Rich is the SME. He's out there every day, and we've talked about this, and yeah, we need to move forward. I thought we already had, actually. So anyway, it's good to know that there's nothing formal, but we need to move forward and document, the formality of getting this work done.
Yeah, so I think the thing here is I appreciate the fact that Rich has brought this up now. We're going back 3 months. So, and I think we've accomplished our task here in bringing the BOA here, having this conversation, discussion, and just kind of fleshing out some of the, I would call it education for everybody involved in the process, and letting the BOA know that we haven't forgot about it. Lucas, go ahead, please.
Yeah, if I could just, so now I forgot my question.
Okay,
I apologize.
that's all right. No, it's quite all right. That's why we wanted the BOA here tonight. We have a new commission. And obviously we have our petition out there for this work. And I think, and there's been some turnover at the BOA. So it's just a matter of reacquaintance and I think just letting everybody know that we're still here.
Yeah, absolutely. I did remember my question.
Please.
Excuse me. When we do a consultant selection, how do you guys like to process that through your system? So every municipality is a little bit different. Do we need to have this on your next commission meeting agenda for a consultant selection decision? So how that would work on our end is I put an advertisement out for the projects that we need consultant services for, and we get letters of interest in. And then we have a selection committee, of which the airport is one of the members, where we go through the different letters, rank them based off qualifications, and then select the best fit for the airport and these projects. If that's going to require the group to meet and make a decision on it, we should probably get that in the agenda for next meeting, so we can keep that ball rolling.
Yeah, just point of information, I do think that would be the appropriate process for us.
Okay. And when is the next commission meeting?
It would be the first Thursday of August, so that would put us at
their monthly. I guess I should have asked.
Yep, monthly
Okay.
meeting. So August 3rd would be our next meeting.
Okay, so that's probably going to be too fast for a consultant section. So maybe it'd be in the September meeting. We'd be looking to have that in there.
Okay.
And we can schedule always a meeting, sooner with a week announcement to the city with, a single agenda item if we need to make a decision on this to help the process along.
Okay. So once I get the petition wrapped up and the eligibility statement, I'll get that distributed to you guys. Should be next week, assuming I can get the higher ups to put their signature on it. And immediately after that, I'll issue that consultant selection ad. I'll run it through you guys to make sure you agree with it. But we'll get that out in the streets so that we have a few weeks to get the letters in, and then a few weeks to look at them before we're talking about them again as a group.
Thank you very much.
Mhm.
Okay, if we're finished discussing our surface maintenance petition, I'll bring up the next topic. Are we ready to move on? Great. Well, I'll just fill in the BOA a little bit. We've been having an ongoing discussion about a compatible land use plan. The BOA has a very nice flyer that we've referenced and looked at. There's kind of a lot of common sense things. And we're thinking of, drafting our own. We have a lot of information out at the city, but trying to put something together in a more of a for a non-aviator, to say, hey, guess what? You live near an airport, or you want to build near an airport, or you're thinking of doing something or anything in or around the vicinity of an airport. Here's a real simple guideline to think about, and then start engaging with the city as you move forward, and what your thoughts on that are. Kevin, go ahead.
Yeah, can I jump in real quick? Yeah, so there's that, but then there's the after looking at it further, there's in the grant assurances, Article 21, there's mention to airport compatible land use planning, and that the airport operator manager, mostly the operator, I think, is responsible for adhering to this is the FAA AIP specific assurances from May of 2022, that they're required to have some sort of a plan, and it gives some guidance. The BOA gives really good guidance. I know the BOA has taken a lot of information from the California guidance, who's kind of taken the lead on this. And yeah, I'd be interested in hearing what your position is, in light of a lot of things that are happening right now, where they're not closing airports anymore. We're short of pilots by some estimations, 10,000 pilots. It's expected to increase by 50,000. These general aviation airports are primarily for flight training. So it's getting more and more critical, but then there's more and more pressure on encroachment and building non-compatible development near airports. And what is based on your expert opinion, what are the requirements in terms of the assurances as far as having some sort of program in place, whether it includes zoning or not? It gives you a lot of leeway, but what's your position on these compatible land use plans?
Yeah, I don't have a ton of experience myself with them. The thing I have experienced is the lack of a plan or lack of authority, essentially, to protect your airport and the lands around it. And it just creates headaches and goes against grant assurances. You're correct. The grant assurances are somewhat loosely written. I think that's in an attempt to have one grant assurance cover the whole nation in all the different sized airports. So a lot of times it's do the best that you can with what you have. My personal opinion, being in the aviation world, is that you should be trying to protect it as much as you can, because places are growing. Every city or urban area is going to be expanding. If the airport's in that footprint, they're going to people are going to try to build as close as they can to the airport. And if they're going tall, you're going to have towers. It creates headaches for everyone, including the developers out there, when they have to jump through our hoops or FAA's hoops to even build, but then later find out that they can't do the things they wanted to because the airport's in the way. So I 100% think it's a good thing to have. I don't know, like, for certain if a zoning would be needed. I'm pretty sure it's not a requirement necessarily, just that you are protecting as best you can. But in general, it's just positive guidance to be doing that. And I don't know of any downsides other than, you have to go through that process, and your constituents and people you live around, you're never going to have everyone agree. So it can be a process. And that's just my limited experience. I apologize. I don't have a ton of experience in that. I don't know. I know I seem to be constantly jumping over to Mark, but I don't know if he's going to have any experience either on that one.
My experience is that most airports in the state of Wisconsin, to that grant assurance specifically, if we're talking about having a formal plan, the vast majority do not. I think only like a dozen or so GA airports in the state have land use zoning, I guess, specifically. I'm guessing that most airports, especially, would have at the county level or the municipal level would have some sort of land use plan connected maybe to the, city comprehensive plan or county-wide comprehensive plan, but not specifically to the airport, just because of the fact that a lot of airports, similar to, to yours, but you're certainly not alone, there's a few that are still in rural areas. I think the last one that got adopted was maybe Dodge County Airport, just north of Juneau. 3 sides of the airport are basically incredibly rural. It was actually relatively smooth to get through, but otherwise, if you're surrounded by, neighborhoods and different townships, then you run into having to work with all of them to iron out details for all the different, obviously the closer you are to the airport, more restrictions, farther away, less restrictions kind of thing within a certain radius. And like Bearwood Ells is an example where they tried that and they made it through a few meetings and decided this was not worth the effort for various reasons. And that does happen because it's something that, I guess on the funding side, just to give you an idea, it is something that we fund, but we only fund it as a reimbursement. So it's not a project that we start with you on. That's really a local project. Then if you complete it and it's adopted by, the airport, then we would actually reimburse you for all or part of it. There's a certain level, and I don't remember what that is off the top of my head that we fund. But it's, it's a decent amount of money for state aid that you would get back. But yeah, kind of to Lucas's point, most airports it's not formally done very much. And I guess that's one thing maybe I should ask some of my counterparts in other states is how many of their airports have it. Because if we're way behind and, every other state has 90%, ordinances and whatever, then maybe we should reconsider our position and be a little more encouraging of that. But FAA doesn't come in to that, that grant assurance and actually say exactly what to do. Kevin, to your point, it's kind of vague, probably on purpose, because otherwise the FAA would be delineating exactly what you need to do, and every airport is different. There's no 2 airports that are alike. So, yeah, outside of having a formal ordinance and going through that process, there's nothing. Most airports, I would say, it's all very informal. Maybe even down to like relationship building with the neighbors to make that work as best as possible. And that's not the greatest answer in the world, but that's kind of Lucas issues. I have experience with that. I worked on a few of them when I was at MSA, but not on those ordinances, but not, they're few and far between.
We did once, we did discuss an actual LUZO, and that did go to the City Common Council, and the Common Council did vote that down. So we have a pretty clear picture at this point of what direction we can't pursue. So our thinking was more to have very much an informal plan, but a documented plan, and that's it. We obviously have an airport layout plan. We completed a master plan. We have an existing airport layout plan. We do have some things published on our website, citing various ordinances in the area in terms of height restrictions and things like that. We have been doing some development in the area. There's some new neighborhoods that are going to come online, and there's going to be some retention ponds, and there's been some discussion as far as wildlife attachments go. It's part of our dialogue. I think what we want to do is just have something a little more concise that anybody in the city and anybody in the community area can go to our website, look at, and say, here's some general ideas and guidelines regarding development, operating, living around an airport. And like I said, you do have one flyer that's out. It's not bad. It's probably a little dated if just in terms of the contacts that are listed on it for the BOA. So,
yeah.
Any other questions by any of the commissioners or BOA input on this? Kevin, go ahead.
Okay. Yes. Yeah. Exactly. I agree, and maybe it's a question for the FAA, but would that be adequate if we did something like the chair just mentioned, is that adequate to meet the requirements? So we have these grant assurances or AIP grant assurance. It's a contract. It's a contract that you sign. It's legal. In fact, we should probably go look at the other. I made some notes here. There's 39 specific assurances. So that's just one. That's just number 21. Is that if we do something that the chairman just mentioned, and we're in the process of doing it, is that adequate? Or is this a question for the FAA? So that's also a question that I have.
Sure. I would say that since, a lot of our airports don't have a formal plan, that having anything, even an informal guidance, is a positive step in the right direction and would be meeting that grant assurance. But that's just Lucas talking. So I think what we should do is run this by Hal Davis in our office, who's our compliance officer. And he could just verify that for you guys so you don't go down that path for hopefully no reason. I think you guys are probably familiar with him, but I will take a note here to just ping him on that and let him know your guys' plan, and he can respond or reach out to you guys with what he thinks. But like I said, I'm pretty sure that that's meeting the intent of that grant assurance, and probably more so than others have been doing. So even better.
I think that would be fantastic, because then we're not looking to make work for the city or anybody else. But as Kevin has pointed out, as I think as long as we're always showing intent, then we're probably covering our bases, aren't we? Okay, great, thank you. Anything else to review on this? Any other questions from anybody else? We can move on to the next item. I see a lot of shaking heads. Okay, thank you. There's quite a bit of history to this one. And again, we're not, and I'll just restate this to the commissioners tonight as well, because of the contentious nature of the next thing I'm about to say, which is right-hand traffic pattern. Now, that said, there's some history to this discussion, going back quite a few years, even brought up in our airport master plan. And the reason bringing this up to the BOA tonight is, so historically throughout our master plan and previous commission meetings, we've been pinged by the community and locals to say, what can you do to reduce the noise over my neighborhood, right? So, and people throwing the idea out there of a right-hand traffic pattern as opposed to a left-hand traffic pattern. So there's probably nothing new there to anybody at BOA. And in all of our previous meetings and discussions, we discussed it, but at each step of the way, the decision was made by each commission at that time to simply maintain our current left-hand pattern and the noise abatement. Our goal is always to strive for safety and security. So that's why we are where we're at. So we'd like your take on this. Also, we just also noticed that the FAA just also reissued some language and verbiage stating, the safest pattern is a standard pattern.
Yeah, unfortunately, you hit another topic that I'm not super well versed in. You guys being pilots probably know that a little bit better than I do. What I have heard in my experience is the last thing you just said is, if we can keep things standards for pilots, that's going to be the safest option, because the same as driving your car. There's a reason interstates and highways are all standardized. So we're all expecting the same things. The best I could offer you is I could coordinate or reach out to our pilot and some of our other technical experts on it, because I don't know what would go behind even making that change. I know it's possible, but the documentation behind it would probably have to be a good amount to offset that safety factor. I think you have FAA's kind of input or guidance based off what you just said. Again, that they like that standardized things as best as possible. But I honestly, if I went any further, I think I'd be saying things that I don't know are true. So I'd have to pull on our experts before I could go any farther.
Thanks. Rich, please go ahead.
Okay, just some historical perspective. We've revisited this a number of times over the years, including probably about 2006. There was the BOA representatives came out, spoke with neighborhood groups, and explained the reasoning for not wanting to go with the right-hand traffic pattern. My understanding is that right-handed traffic patterns are there for safety. They're not there for noise abatement. In having one runway, which if we ran a right-hand traffic pattern off of going west and a left-hand traffic pattern off of going to the east, we would have people meeting on the north of the runway head on, because there can be aircraft coming into this airport with no radio. There can be miscommunication, and there are often very ambiguous winds and conditions. And simply going right hand for everything would actually put even more noise at lower altitudes over the township, which is town of Middleton area south. The only thing it wouldn't do, or it would do, is keep probably the pattern in a little tighter to the west, so that it wouldn't be out over the $1 million homes that we've had some people rather vehemently about that noise complaint. And again, to let the new members know that may or may not know this, there's something called a congressional investigation. When the FAA, when there are enough people or the right, if you're connected and you contact your representative and your representative sends a message to the FAA to look into something, it's called a congressional. That's what the FAA calls it. Charlie 29, Middleton Municipal Airport, has had no fewer than 3 congressional investigations by the FAA looking into our noise abatement procedure. Every time they have come back with, these guys are doing everything they can to minimize our noise footprint consistent with operating an airport and being safe. There's never been a recommendation to change what we're doing. So just to let everyone know historically that this has been something we've gone over and over and over. Typically, the people that make this complaint hate it when I say this, but essentially they're saying fly over someone else's house. And that's exactly what they're saying. And does the dairy farm north of our airport have any less right than someone that lives in a $1 million subdivision? Nope, I don't believe it. Anyway.
Thank you, Rich. Any other questions to the BOA by the commission, or comments from the BOA regarding this?
Yeah. David, I'll just chime in. I just happened to be in the office today, and I talked to our pilot, that Levi Eastlick, who Lucas referenced, and he did mention to me that it is possible, but through the 7480 process, it's a form or a series of forms that you could pursue this if you wanted to, but to Lucas's point, it does actually require some justification for that. And there are, I think, quite a few. I mean, not many, but there are several airports in the state that have right-hand patterns for different reasons. I know I've seen the little graphic we have somewhere in our office that shows them. So it could be something to pursue, but I think Rich also made some good points about, would it actually be an improvement? And that's something that, certainly is a local discussion about, about that. So, but there is a process that could be followed to achieve that, if that is something that wants to be pursued.
Okay, thank you. I think then probably, Brian, the question would be is, we were asked to bring this up. We have, some guidance now and some input and a lot of history to it. Is it just put it on a discussion for a future meeting? In the sense that the commission would discuss it and we can, I guess, get into the weeds of it at that time.
Sure.
I mean, where it puts us in a tough spot, obviously, once someone in the community or someone on our common council brings something to the commission and asks that we have a discussion on something, we have to obviously, do that. We can't just say, well, no, we're not going to listen to you. But I think it's important that we have the input from the BOA. We also have a lot of local experts right on this commission, with Rich and Kevin as historically as CFIs and operation. Go ahead, Kevin.
Yeah, I was just thinking, would it be beneficial in the future to have this as an agenda item, and then Rich or whoever, Mark Opitz or whoever might have previous discussions and these congressional investigations with the FAA to bring that information and do a presentation and say, okay, we've looked at this a couple of times, just to update people who are new to the system or new to having issues. This was what the previous decision was, something like that. Would that be beneficial in the future to have that on the agenda?
Yeah, we could include that information in the packet whenever this gets scheduled for future discussion. Yep.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. Anything else on this where we can move on to our next item?
Yeah, just one thing. If you want me to pursue talking to any of our technical people, I'll hold off on that until you guys let me know if you want us to dive down that hole again or even any further. But we do have, like Mark mentioned, some experts that I could ask questions to if needed.
Okay, thanks. I frankly, I'm of the position that I think we have enough history and enough documentation and we have enough expertise on this commission that we can certainly have a rational discussion. And I think if we have a meeting about this on a future agenda item and we bring someone from the BOA in, I guess this question is to Brian. Can we do that? Can they be part of our, call it, deliberation discussion?
Well, you would structure it as similar to this agenda where you could bring in a representative from the BOA to provide a presentation on a topic, and you can ask questions of them, and then have a separate agenda item for discussion and potential action if need be.
Okay. I don't want to, waste the BOA's resources, but if you think there's someone who is willing to come to one of our meetings and can really help us talk through this, I mean, it would be helpful to the community.
Sure. Let me ask the questions and see what I can dig up for you guys, and then if we have someone that has enough insight and is willing to present, I can certainly let you know, or just field questions. Anyone in the tech services section would probably be a little bit better than I am on that topic. So,
okay, thank you. Okay, then the last item, and maybe I think we touched on this when we were really getting into the surface improvement discussion, but really open questions from the commission members regarding our grant usage and timing. And Rich opened with this and saying, well, use it or lose it. So is there money out there that we should be asking for and using outside of our current projects? Is there a mystery genie or a golden pot at the end of the rainbow? Rich, go ahead if you have some thoughts on that to help.
Oh, that wasn't my intent.
That's a good intent.
But well, the project for the AWAS could be looked upon as that. But okay. Mostly I'm thinking about the money we're getting, the enhanced amount of money that's coming in. We want to have projects in line in order to take care of use that efficiently as opposed to having to loan it out or gift it to another project, whatever. So I think now we know we have very expensive projects coming up with the reconstruction of runway and taxiway. Just want to make sure that we're in line and that it is in process. So the money that is coming in, which should be sufficient for at least our share and whatever else there, or possibly state aid with the projects as well, that it's timed out properly, that it's going to work, that we're not going to have to, lose any issue with it or try to borrow from someone else.
Yeah, I can jump in on that, Rich. Yeah, so the lighting project, that used up, so you don't really have any old money sitting around right now, which is good. That used up your 2019 entitlement, which expires in a few months. That expires in September, so that's spent. There's actually a little bit left in there. We just need to put that money. It was left over from a different project. It needs to move in, and it'll be spent down. So your 2020 money also was spent, and most of your 21 money. So that leaves you with about $300,000 of federal money that will have an entitlements here for you when the new block grant arrives, which might be as early as next week, hopefully. So that money, be a good amount of money for us to put towards, the AWAS, and then the runway taxiway design for rehabilitation, and then even if we had to next year for the crack seal. And then we'll continue to bring in money accordingly. The way the block grant works now, it used to be the way it was previously done, is we take money and then figure out how to spend it later. FAA discourages that, and for good reason. So now we're going to, have a plan for the money. And so if we don't have a plan for your money in 1 year, what we would do is we just wouldn't take it. You wouldn't lose any money. It would just stay at FAA. And then the next year you could actually take 2 entitlements if we had need for it. So, when we've talked in the past, and a lot of people on this are new, but you can bank your money, quote unquote, for 4 years. There's 2 ways of doing it, either having it here in Wisconsin or having it at FAA and then bring it all in one block grant, and it all has the same life. That's the issue. If we bring money in a block grant, once the grant's here, the clock starts and we have 4 years to spend it down. So right now, as far as your AIP entitlements go, we don't have any money that's, all the money that's expiring is spent. So that's good. You guys check that box, the lighting project. The other pot of money that I wanted to talk about, since it seems appropriate, is the infrastructure money, that bipartisan infrastructure law money. Your airport, as a regional general aviation airport in the national plan, is getting about $300,000, just short of that, of federal money extra. So you get $150 every year for entitlement, and this extra bill money is about $300,000 of federal money at 90%. So it's worth, you divide that, I should be able to do that math in my head. It's worth about $330,000 total value there. So that money is the money we probably need to start figuring out that first year of 2022 money. What do we want to use it on? We could put some of it to the design. We could use next year if we do this crack fill project on the pavements. We could, mark it for the AWAS and then plan for the AWAS to happen in 25, let's say, with that money. The big thing about that money is, unlike the block grant funds, that I can just say, hey, we're like your 23 money, I have earmarked, they ask us to say where the money is going to be used. So I have it for the runway rehab design. So that's what it's delineated for, so I can take it, even though we don't have the project started, I already have the money coming. Bill money has to be based upon bids and negotiated contracts. We either have to have something out for bid, the bids in hand with the exact number, or we'd have to say, hey, we want to apply this to someone's contract for the design of this project. And then we have the exact number because FAA is going to give us, the first year of bill, your airport received $295,000 of money that's allocated for you. We might never get that exact sum. We might get, $204,000.17 or something like that. That's what it would come out to. And we take the rest later in a different grant. It's just different. It's a different process. So our biggest thing is to work with you on how to use that money, because that money will expire in the end of the 22 money expires. Let me look at, I have it right in front of me. I talk about this all the time, but I forgot it. September 30th of 2025, we have to have that money in here. So we have 2 years, but 2 years goes quick. So that's probably the biggest thing. Your block grant money, I'm quite honestly not worried about, because we could just, if we don't use your 24 money, we could just defer that, leave it at FAA. But that bill money, we really need to figure out how to use it. You know, we can split it between a bunch of different things. We don't have to spend it on one project. We could split it, you know, AWAS and crack fill and design and split that up. And then the 23 money, you know, sooner or later, that'll become something to worry about too. Worry about in the sense we don't want you to lose it. You know, that's money, the bill money, unlike your entitlement. That money, if you wanted to, you know, Rich kind of alluded to this, you could trade your money to a different airport. You could give your money away to a different airport. Your bill money, either you use that money or no one else does, and it goes back to headquarters. So we really want to make sure that money comes in and used by the city of Middleton if you want to use it on projects. Whereas your AIP money, you know, the normal airport improvement program entitlements, we could theoretically do other things with those if necessary. But I think you have enough projects coming, we won't have to do that. But we just also want to make sure we don't lose any money. So I think that'll be something we don't need to figure it out tonight, but something for the commission to think about is, you know, making sure we just use that bill money. So if I come to you and say, hey, you know, we can get this project going, do you want to use your bill money? That's why I'm asking that question. So no, I'm actually glad you brought that up and had it on for discussion.
Okay, so from my simplistic perspective, then I guess I'm aiming this back at Brian again. It's just really a matter of getting together with, I suppose, Bill and looking at our finances and then saying, okay, where are we at? And can we start using this? We have the funds now to start, you know, using our portion of the money as we move ahead with the AWAS crack fill and design for the taxi and runway improvement.
Yep.
Okay. Thank you, Rich. Anybody else have any other questions on this? Briefly noted, Alder Jackson, member of our airport commission, just joined the meeting late, and so he's listening and participating. Well, this would bring an end to the BOA invite portion of our commission meeting. I'll just offer one more round to anybody if they have questions for the BOA, or if the BOA has any comments or questions or asks back to us. Okay. Again, Mark and Lucas, thank you for your time and effort. And you're welcome to stay on and listen in to our meeting and hear the ugly truth now, or have a nice evening. We appreciate your time.
Thank you. Thanks for coming.
Yeah, thank you for having us.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you.
I guess in parting, I would just say that please feel free to reach out to me with any questions for the airport. The Bureau's here as a resource for you, so don't ever hesitate. Yeah, and I think everyone has my contact information. If not, I can certainly get that out.
Send an email off to you can send your contact information to Brian. He can forward it to us. Thank you.
Perfect. Yep.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Yeah, thank you. And I unfortunately won't be able to hang around as much as I'd like to. I would also like to see my kid today, and I haven't. So.
Okay. Thank you much.
Thank you.
Okay, then moving on. We have the chair report, and I don't have really anything else to add, so I can move directly right on to the manager's report.
Okay, you've got it in front of you, but I do have a few additions that I will add in. But okay, from May 31 to June 26 of this year, 8 individuals made a total of 63 overflight or noise reports, 12 more than May. Multiple reports were made by 5 individuals. 1 individual made 30 reports, 1 19, 1 4, 1 3, and 3 making 1 each. They were made in normal manner via the city's site, direct emails to the city, via phone, both the hotline and directly to our office, and by an email to my business account. Responded to all of those who wished a response. To the best of my knowledge, looking at all of this, no violations of the FAA regulations were apparent. in all of those reports. One aircraft that was not based at our place, but was there doing instruction, specialized instruction, generated 33 of these reports. I did speak to the pilot and his instructor. No, they don't work for me. And the complaints dropped off rather rapidly after he took my suggestions to heart. No aircraft accidents or incidents on the field. Mowing is continuing. I should say it had started a while ago. Very good news on the Swift fuel. Not only do we have it, but we are using it in 2 of our trainers. The tank will be, or excuse me, the pumps will be certified. The pump will be certified by the state for sale, and then we're going to be able to start selling the 94 octane Swift unleaded fuel for the aircraft that have the lower compression engines and can get a supplemental type certificate or a permission from the FAA to actually use that fuel. Some of them are already approved by it just because of work that Swift has already done. And even more surprising is that price came in lower than quoted for a change. The margins are going to be pretty damn slim, pardon my language, but we're going to attempt to sell it at the same price as 100 octane and see if we can actually move that fuel through. That seems an appropriate thing for a Maury airplane company to do. Lots of events coming up. July 9, very soon. Sunday, pancake breakfast by Experimental Aircraft Association, Chapter 93. They'll be in our maintenance hangar. Come on out. It goes from 7 until noon. And bring your kids or your grandkids. They love that stuff. There'll be fire trucks, probably a guard helicopter. There's going to be just all sorts of interesting things for people to do. July 21, Capital Flights Rock the Ramp, biggest advertised as the biggest pre-Oshkosh aviation event out there. We're honored to host it at Charlie 29. Young Eagles, if you have anyone youngster that would like a free airplane ride and a good introduction to aviation, August 12th, we're going to be hosting at our place in the terminal. We're also going to be hosting 4 seminars come through the end of the year, August 22nd, September 22, October 26, December 12, and those are safety seminars will be hosted in our conference room and or in the hangar if we get enough participants. I mentioned the 2 outages, localizer outages. We're going to figure out what the heck's going on with that. And there may have been a lightning strike near our precision approach position indicators, the PAPI lights on runway 10. They're burnt out. They were repaired today. So I don't know what the bill will be on that. We'll be passing it on to the city, but they are up and running again. Otherwise, I don't think there, and there is we had mentioned this in previous, or had previous issues with this, where the north fork of the Pheasant Branch goes underneath the runway. There's been a little bit of settling. And we noticed again, every spring we check this out, there was an area that needed to be filled with gravel. We've had, it's nice to have consultants that have airplanes on the field. One of the fellows from Mead and Hunt was there, looked it over. Really, we're thinking that we're going to need to take the pavement up, refill that area, and then repave it. That would be about a day or 2 with the runway closed. We're going to need to move forward on something along those lines. It's not going to be, I don't believe, at all eligible for projects. It's not going to be all that much money to have it done. But that's a recommendation. We need to get Mead and Hunt involved with that and get it moving forward. So, and I do believe by airport manager and the amount of money that it's running, again, we can just go ahead with it at the beginning and then get some bids on it.
Okay, Brian, anything you need additionally for pursuing of that repair?
No, I've been waiting to get some cost estimates back from Mead and Hunt, and then we'll proceed.
Okay, thank you. Anybody have questions regarding the airport manager's report to Rich? Okay, moving on to finance. Brian, if you could bring that up on the screen. All I can add is in my cursory look at this year from last year and looking for consistency, I'm not seeing anything that jumps out. I would leave more open to Brian. We note, Rich, that the credits to airport manager contract are finally in. Brian, any comments on the finances?
Yeah, nothing out of the ordinary. As we've talked about before, this payment's going to come in different batches, and so we're tracking with where we were at last year. So, if I receive any notes from finance that there's any concerns or anything to be aware of, I'll be sure to pass those along. But I've not received any notice to that effect.
Okay, thank you. Okay, moving on to our next discussion item of review of the noise FAQ. I did go through it, and we'll bring Brent on board here to fill in and have a discussion on this. I went through it, made my own notes and comments, but I think before getting into any input at that level, I'd like this, Brent would give us an overview. It was an ask to start putting something like this together. Take it away, Brent.
I don't have a lot of comments beyond what you see, but I think it's consistent with, how any other airport might respond to the routine questions they get about airport noise. Gives a little bit more in-depth information so that our airport manager doesn't have to continually repeat himself. He can then defer, people to learn a little bit more at our website or wherever we decide to publish this. It just provides some consistency and aligns very well with how the FAA talks about noise, and how big and or small airports talk about noise. And it's a consistent language, and it's a consistent way that we tell the story about how noise impacts our neighbors, but also how it's potentially managed or not managed by the airport. But I think it really helps our airport manager a little bit, give him a place on a website that he can direct constituents to, or residents or neighbors to, that might have more concerns than he has bandwidth or time to answer.
And Rich has got his hand up.
Yeah, I thought this was a very nicely drafted document, really covers all the bases. And having this out available would be useful. I'm not really sure. Well, anyway, it's a very good document. I appreciate it. I think having it available to people and having a reference to it would be very nice. We can tag that in on the various sites, have that Q&A thing, and we'll see what result it actually comes up to. But it is it's a better crafted bit than me trying to type up a quick response to the questions. this is a little more, there's more thought that's been put into this, more time than I generally have, unfortunately.
Well, and I think, the burden that's placed on Rich on this walks a fine line sometimes of where we ask him to really be an analyst and be quite technical about this, gather the facts, our rules being, our pilots violating any rules or our pilots not. Now we start getting into the gray area of this. So, I'm sorry, Jack, go ahead.
Yeah, I thought it was a great document, guys. And I think from our perspective, it reads really, really well. I'm just curious if it's worth further exercise if there's a way to reach out to some of the repeat reporters, ask them for feedback on that. If there's any other questions that would be useful or instructive for them to include that maybe we weren't thinking about. That was my only comment.
Great, and that actually will play into our next discussion item. So when I went through this, just some comments I have. Take it or leave it. But these are kind of my edits and thoughts. And under the second section of why do some aircraft sound different or louder than others? In there's a sentence in there where it starts with newer aircraft and aircraft engines typically are quieter as a result of improved design. And what I was thinking is really in this vein, something that might have more relevance to the type of complaints we get is that some aircraft make more noise during takeoff and landing because of the configuration of that aircraft during that process. So, and Kevin, this is something that you've also had some thoughts on as well. And I'm wondering if we could incorporate a little bit of that into it, because that has seemed to echo some of the complaints that we've received where the airplane is in a takeoff configuration. It's a high performance piston airplane. The prop is flat, and so there's more noise.
Yeah, and then some of the newer airplanes too, you can't control the propeller speed. It's maybe Rich can address that more, like the Cirruses. So they take off and the props are going at a higher RPM. So the prop tips, in essence, are going transonic or break the sound barrier. So it's going to be noisier. And on some airplanes, they can bring that back manually. But I guess some of the newer airplanes, they can't. It's a little harder because it's connected. It's coupled with the throttle. Is that right, Rich?
Yeah, it's my understanding again is you have one lever that basically controls power and RPM on some of the more modern aircraft, and I believe that includes the Cirrus. Whereas the older style, you'd have a throttle, you would have a prop control, so you can actually control the RPM individually from the propeller versus having to throttle back, reduce your power, that is, which is not something you want to do on takeoff or initial climb out. So there are, just by the design, to try to make it a simpler aircraft to fly and operate, and it sometimes restricts your ability to reduce that initial noise, climb out noise.
Great. So Brent, take that for what it's worth. It's really, this is input that really is reflective of the type of complaints we get. So maybe if we can craft a little bit of that into this, that would pertain to Middleton a little bit more. Then on page 10, why can't aircraft follow the roads or specific routes to reduce noise? This plays the first half of your statement, starting with, arriving aircraft use a long straight in approach, and ending at the sentence that starts with a pilot can fly freely, So that first those first two sentences, what I was thinking there is, again, some language that plays more to what we see in Middleton, to the nature of complaints. And what I was sort of getting at is, arriving aircraft here either are flying under an IFR condition, so they are flying a straight-in approach, where we tend to get a complaint during IFR days over certain neighborhoods, which is Rich can go into some technical detail on, or very much on the non IFR days when the weather's really good and everybody who's a VFR pilot, student, and a lot of the training activity that takes place at the airport now can come out and catch up on their learning lessons and flying. And so then what we get is a real strong uptick in following the traditional pattern, whether it be runway 28 noise abatement, or whether it be runway 10 east-west configuration. And then, of course, the shorter north-south turf runway. So what we see on those days, Brent, is that's where we see kind of that, all of a sudden, that uptick where, you get the occasional IFR complaint because of that long straight-in approach, but then all of a sudden, here we are on a nice weather day and everybody's kind of catching up. Any other thoughts, comments from Rich or commissioners on this? Okay, great.
Yeah. Oh.
I have one. I've got a comment if I can.
Yes, please.
I think would it be good to include the fact that we have a voluntary noise abatement procedure in there to reduce noise? Like I don't remember reading anything in there that seems to reinforce that.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I'm sure Brent can just put a sentence right in there.
We can.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you just show that
It's,
the community that we are trying, right? I mean, there is
Right.
Yeah.
something to
Yeah.
happen.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Yeah, we can add that. That's no problem.
Rich and then Kevin.
Yeah, I believe the voluntary noise abatement procedure is on the site already, the website. So just having a click or a link to it would be useful, or mentioning it. Also, just for in weather conditions, for instance, a heavy overcast that's relatively low can reflect sound back. Very cold days the aircraft will be much, they would sound louder because the denser air conducts the sound waves far more than the thin air. If the wind is blowing a certain way, you're more likely, if it's blowing from the airport toward you, you're more likely to hear. Things like that are, and I don't know if that's part of the weather there or not, but those are things that also contribute to this. And I do try to let people know about that.
And I also think, just to dovetail on that, I think it's important to mention the voluntary program, but also we can't hang our hat on that, because there's a lot of times that cannot be followed, will not be followed, and we can't enforce it. So we have to be very careful how we structure that sentence. Because if we say, even though we say it's a voluntary request, then the next question is, well, why didn't they? So now we have to go and ask the pilot, well, why didn't you follow this? And it becomes, in my experience of 12 years of dealing with noise complaints, it becomes problematic depending on how we say it. So I think we have to craft that sentence very, very carefully so that we're not putting additional due diligence on pilots and asking for additional information, because while it is voluntary and it's something we would prefer, we have to make sure that when we explain that in the document that we're there's no enforcement to that. So.
Kevin, and then Brian Shaw.
Yeah, so the noise abatement, that's pretty standard. Orange County for the commercial ops have noise abatement. They're expected to follow it. We have noise abatement. Most people follow it. I think it's very important that we reference that in this document under, what's the airport doing? What's the city doing? I think there's a section in there, but noise abatement is standard at most airports I flew in and out of anyway. So yeah, we can say, hey, it is voluntary. Obviously, you can't follow it during IMC operations and whatnot. And but still, but most people do follow it. I've been out there. I spent a lot of time over the past few years, just observing what the planes are doing, and 95% of the people are following the noise abatement. So I do think we should reference it. We may need to be careful with the wording, but it should be in there, and it's part of every airport that has noise issues. It's part of their standard SOPs.
Brian Shaw.
All right, and I guess looking at that, if it is 95% are following, then I don't know that it would be too much of a burden to ask the 5% that aren't following it if there would be a reason why they're not following it. Right. I mean, I definitely agree. There are days where personally, I don't hear a single plane. And I know that there's got to be traffic at the airport. I doubt there's a day where no plane ever lands. And then there are days where it is crazy busy and crazy loud. And, it's either a repeat offender or whatever the issues are. But if it is, 95% or say even 85%, I don't feel it would be an undue burden to ask those pilots, those 15%, why you aren't following the voluntary piece. I understand if there is weather or some extenuating circumstance, maybe that's a day where it isn't followed up on. But if we are having good adherence, then it sounds like there's just a couple of bad eggs that aren't adhering when everyone else is. And I don't want those 85% to get a bad reputation because of the 15% or the 5% that aren't. So I just comment on that. And the second comment is kind of approach and like distance from the runway. What I think would be helpful in this document would be some sort of chart or some sort of map that could show where the plane goes from city into approach, so that where the 1,000 feet to 500 feet ceiling is. And I know that varies by weather and everything else, and we can caveat what we have, but I think if the intent of this document is to educate our citizens and our fellow neighbors, knowing that, hey, you're within 400 feet of the airport, and obviously they're going to be below that 1,000-foot ceiling, even if you're in a house, I think might be helpful. And I feel like we've seen that from Rich before, like some chart, but including that in here would just reinforce that, factors being equal, this is where, planes are going to start dropping below that 1,000-foot threshold. That's it.
Thank you. Excellent. Anybody else have any other comments or input? Okay. Then the last paragraph.
Sorry, David. Rich had his hand up.
Oh, Rich.
I'd be happy to draft do a rough draft at least of reasons why people aren't able to follow that noise abatement procedure. There's a number of reasons, and also it should be noted that this is contrary to the standard pattern that everyone who didn't learn at our airport, they learned is used to flying. So knowing that they may go back to their initial training and do their turnout at 500 feet and climb out or thereabouts, that's important. But anyway, I'd be happy to draft reasons why people wouldn't be able to follow the voluntary noise procedure, and that could be added to it.
Thanks. The last paragraph, why doesn't the airport prohibit late night flights? That's all fine. I was just wondering if could add a little plain language to it. It's just it's just so legal. If it can be worded in a way that says, airplanes pretty much can fly 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And the FAA says they can. Okay.
Sorry, Chair. Brian Shaw, do you still have your hand up?
I do. I have one more comment on that. I think just in the looking at 91-119, I've had some feedback from community members that the definitions of urban and rural really aren't in that statute. It's not in 91-119. It talks about being congested and uncongested areas. So I just think we should have some clarity in the wording of rural versus urban, unless you can define that in the document ahead.
Great. Brent will also add that to his notes. And
perfect. Thank you.
so then at the next meeting, we can just review, we can review this again. Let's make a motion in the sense that do we want and approve the use of an FAQ that Rich can incorporate into responding to citizens, and the city could post on a website. And with that, Brian, would we have to then vote on it again for some edits on Brent's part, or no?
Amy, I think the best way would be to, so Brent's received your comments, and we can work on addressing them to the extent we can for whether it's the next meeting or the meeting after that. And then we'd bring it back and just have it, be a document that you would accept. It wouldn't be necessarily approval of the document because, again, going back to parliamentary training, you'd accept the document, and then once you've done that, then we'd put it up on the website.
Okay. All right. So then we'll just leave it in draft mode right now, and at the next meeting, we'll give it a final pass.
Okay.
Dave, may I ask a question? This is Mark.
Absolutely.
I've been reflecting on the conversation I've heard tonight and also on previous conversations regarding noise and patterns. And I guess to a layperson, what would be the analogy? Is this a fair analogy, I guess, which would be, some countries in the world, you drive on the other side of the road from what we're used to. And if we were to change our pattern, would it be analogous to saying we suddenly have to learn UK style driving here? Whereas if a pilot were to fly to an airport that had a left or counterclockwise pattern, they would know that they're flying to a different country, if you will. I'm using that as an analogy. Is that a fair way of looking at it in terms of how our brains are trained to when we are in our home turf? Is that a reasonable comparison or not? Is that kind of the challenge we're facing?
Oh my. This is like asking a pilot, what technique is the best way to land? Chop and drop, power on, 10 degrees of flaps, 20 degrees of flaps. And that's why, and I see the hands are up. So
I'm sorry, I shouldn't have done that. Sorry.
I'll simply comment this. The FAA always asks us a few simple questions. Is it safe? Is it smart? Is it legal? And that's really what it boils down to, is safety at the end of the day. It's all about safety. So, okay, Rich and Kevin, go ahead.
Mark, I've used that exact analogy a number of times, talking about right hand, left hand. Also, there's something, it's like institutional memory. Right. If you've been going in and out of XYZ airport for the last 40 years, and it's always been this traffic pattern, always a right hand, the NOTAM and the notice on the sectional chart may or may not register. It should, but it doesn't. always. Those are the things that you're trained on to do. Yes, we can handle right-hand traffic patterns. We're trained to do so. But again, as David said, in our case, trying to put a right-hand, left-hand, or just two right-hand traffic patterns doesn't do anything. Right and left causes a safety problem. Right and right just moves the noise to makes it worse and moves it to a different part of the air, our neighbors. So yeah, anyway, get off my soapbox here.
And I was going to say exactly the same thing. You know, we've been doing it be a difficult transition.
I guess is that concept. The reason I brought it up is because I don't know if I've heard that you say that before, Rich, but you probably haven't. Maybe that's why the idea was in my head. But I just wonder if that's a reasonable comparison or an analogy. Maybe that's something to frame that as part of the document that Brent's working on. Whatever, I'll let you figure that out, Brent.
Okay. I don't see any hands up. Okay, the last item for discussion, and Brian, I'll look to you for some guidance here as far as we stick with proper city policy. So, past iterations of the commission opted not to include the allowance for public comment at the beginning of our meetings. It has been brought to the commission now on a couple occasions, and it has been brought to members of the Common Council as well to open this, where we stand on or opening up for public comment sessions at the beginning of each meeting. And Brian, if you would just kind of please give us a refresher on the yays and nays and ins and outs of this.
Yeah, I mean, I can't really speak to the past practice of the commission prior to my employment with the city, but as I mentioned, the city council does accept public comment at the beginning of every city council meeting. The way that they have it structured is each speaker is allowed, no more than 3 minutes. After that 3 minutes is expired, we ask the speaker to stop and let the next person speak if there are other speakers. The commission members or the city council members in this case are not allowed to engage in a back and forth dialogue because those items may or may not be on the agenda for proper discussion. So it's just receiving information from the public commenter, and if the commission so deems it could be added to a future agenda for discussion. My understanding historically that the past iterations of the commission have opted to not do the public comment at the beginning of airport commission meetings, and instead have funneled that public comment to the city council. With the changeover in commission, just was an item wanted to bring up for this group to discuss if they wanted to kind of change practice and go back to allowing public comment at the beginning of the meetings.
Yeah, and so I know I can Kevin and I can just speak to the last couple of years on the commission. So when I came onto the commission, public comment was taken at the beginning of each meeting. I always thought it was handled properly, professionally, and with respect. And the sense I got from the commission at that time, and the decision made, the reason it was the public comment was not to agenda items, and the public comment seemed to be irrelevant to what the commission was discussing at that time. And the public comment almost seemed to be something that would be more aimed towards the Common Council because it was big asks of the city, where the airport commission wasn't really, could be an advisory or technical capacity to these public comments. I mean, the public comments were like, for example, close the airport. Well, that's a Common Council discussion, okay? Or ban the sale of leaded fuel. Again, was a high, these were all political things brought to the airport commission, and they weren't technical things. And it got pretty lengthy, and it went on and on and on. And so I think what the chair tried to do at that time was say, if you have something for the airport commission and you have a comment and it's on the agenda, then please submit that to the commission in writing, and we will then review it and discuss it. So I'm not, now speaking for myself, I'm not beholden to the past practice or our current practice, and would like to open this up to the commission for discussion. And Brian Shaw, please start.
All right. I am all for getting public comment. I feel like here, even if it is something that we can't immediately action or we have no control over, I think hearing comments from our neighbors about what's happening at the airport is an important component of this committee's role. So I'm in favor of bringing that back.
Okay, thank you. Mark, you have a comment?
Yeah, I thought since I used to staff the commission, I thought I would share my perspective. And as some of you know, I actually I've been with the city for 24 years, so I've seen a lot of comments over the years. And also I'm familiar with how other bodies have handled comments, both City of Madison and County Board, and I've seen minutes from other meetings, other committees. The challenge that we ran into a few years ago that prompted restructuring how the public comments was accepted by committees, including the Airport Commission, was that public comment would be given, and sometimes there was a tendency to respond to a specific comment by a committee member or by staff trying to be helpful. And I think that was always the intent, was to try and have a back and forth and be a forum for a sounding board or for responding to questions or concerns. The challenge was raised by the concern was raised by our city attorney's team, the team from the city attorney's office, that you could run afoul of the open meetings law if you start discussing items that weren't on the agenda. And so the advice from the city attorney that was passed through the city administrator was to guide those comments or direct those comments to council meetings where they are staffed by the city attorney. So that is the reason why policy was changed at the advice of the city attorney's office and the city administrator. I certainly, from over the years and various committees that I staff, I can see the appeal and the advantage of having input directly on those subject areas that are germane to under the purview of the committee. And if it does return, I think you just have to be mindful as a body that, and I know Brian is too as staff, that you just can't get into things that aren't on the agenda. You can't get into discussions that aren't on the agenda. That's the main concern. So that's my 2 cents.
Okay, thank you. Any other commissioners have thoughts on opening up future meetings, then again for public input? Comment section, sorry. Okay. So why don't we just take a vote on it? Does that sound about heading down the right path, Brian?
Yeah, it would be something I put on the agenda for the next meeting as a formal action item, and then the committee can decide at that point.
Okay, excellent. Well, that brings us to the last item then. So, I'm sorry, David, please go ahead.
Yeah, as far as putting that public comment issue on the agenda, I think that's a good idea. But I think it should be on there with some direction as to parameters. The comment was made about limiting people to 3 minutes. I would also add to that a sign-in process. If someone wants, and I've seen this in other council meetings from other local governmental bodies, where if you want to make a comment, you have to physically sign in to do that. Or we could arrange some format for doing that online if we're doing these things online. I would also suggest that there be some format that there's a limit to the number of people that can be making comment. In other words, all of a sudden, if you get 20 people signed up to make a comment on one night, it's going to eat up your whole meeting time. So just some real kind of common sense rules and parameters so that we have it in writing, documented, so that people giving public comment know that there are some rules and procedures to follow, as opposed to just shotgunning it. That's my only comment.
Okay, thanks. Excellent. Anybody else? Okay. So then, Brian, help me remember. So we have our future agenda items laid out.
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah, just as recap for the committee, and again, these might not all be scheduled for the next meeting in August, but just kind of a running tally of list of discussion items. So we'll likely have some process back with BOA for the petition process to add in the AWOS and the localizer. I think that's what it is, for discussion after I've spent some more time with their staff on figuring out what the correct process is. That'll come back for discussion at some point in the near future. There will be additional discussion on the right-hand turning movements once we receive some additional information from the BOA technical staff on that. Again, that may not be an August meeting, that may be down the road, but that is kind of on the radar for future discussion. The public comment item will come back with some parameters for the group to discuss and then take a vote on for your consideration. And I think there were probably some items on the list from last time that didn't make it onto this agenda that would come onto a future agenda.
Yep, and then our review of the draft FAQ.
Yes. Yep. Thank you.
So that's a lot of items, and our meetings do not have to go this long and get this drawn out. So we can just take these items one at a time, also, and then leave time, for something that would come up, that needs a discussion that might be urgent, so we can then get it on a future meeting as well. I just knew that tonight would be a more comprehensive meeting because the BOA is here, and I think it was really important that we caught up with them. And so that would be my parting closing summation. Anybody else have anything else they'd like to add? Otherwise, I would make a motion that we can adjourn our meeting.
I'll second it.
Okay, thank you, Brian. As anybody, all those in favor of adjournment, please say aye.
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 Anybody opposed? Okay.